We're just a couple of minutes after 6 o'clock. Welcome to this Thriving Thursdays Mindfulness Matters series. We're absolutely delighted today to have Joanna join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Always a pleasure, Joanna, always a pleasure. So a little bit of background. I mean, we started up these sessions 7 weeks ago, a couple of weeks into the COVID-19 lockdown, where we, as with everybody else, had to cancel our events and all other engagements. And we wanted to bring interculturalists together in this smaller, more intimate setting and find out how you're doing, how you're affected where you are personally, also how you are contributing to this idea of a positive growth mindset, what you're doing to stay both mentally and physically healthy in this quite difficult period. So Joanna is a very good friend, an intercultural practitioner who works at universities, for global companies, for also small and medium-sized companies. Joanna is originally from Poland, currently based in Germany, has also worked in France, and I know Joanna loves traveling. So one of the first questions and one of the things I'd like to know is how you're surviving.
Yeah, good question. Oh, I miss it a lot. And, this is something all of us, we need to acknowledge that, the reality has changed. And of course, we can sit upset home, and there are ways not to be as upset and to think how we can be positive about the situation, which is tricky from time to time. But, we can also travel virtually. And there are fantastic ideas. And actually, what I've done happened by chance, completely by chance, because mid-January, I got to know that my mom was really seriously sick. And it was before the whole COVID situation kicked in. So what actually happened was that I started to send her pieces of art every day, from different museums all over the world, pictures, graphics, sculptures, you name it, with really powerful coaching questions, So how do you, feel about the sense in the picture, what does it remind you of? Really to let's say, bring her to this different space, to this kind of mindfulness, so that she can have a little bit of distraction from the situation. And I didn't really realize the COVID-19, to be honest, because I was so much focused on, the situation, on her, actually, that one day when we had to really, cancel a journey, I realized, something weird is going on. And this was the moment when I really realized, okay, it's getting serious. And still, because of this, dealing with art and just not doing it for me, but doing it for her, I said, wow, this is really something we can create also for all of us, just to have this moment of distraction and to move to a different world. Yeah.
Joanna, I know you've been also running a series of webinars that really are designed particularly to help people establish this sort of human dimension, human connection of virtual meetings. Have you any particular learnings out of those webinars that you could share with us, or any maybe of the key points that you bring across in those webinars? Because this is, I guess, in times of social distancing, it's exactly what we want to achieve, is the sense of connection.
Definitely. First of all, to re-narrate, really, so to change a little bit the story from social distancing to distant socializing. So this is also something what is possible in the virtual space. And actually right now, when everything accelerated so much in the virtual world, to find time and really to take this time consciously to have a check-in. I compare it with you know, air travel. Whenever we go everywhere by plane, we also need to bring a little bit of patience and time, and you know, to check in, to sit, to wait for the embarking, and also to check out. So you know, so to have the beginning and, let's say, the transition part. And this is also during the virtual meetings. So really, that the teams that work together take this first 5, 7, up to 10 minutes time for the well-being check-in. So not really, you know, the superficial, oh, how are you? I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Or oh, where are you? Ha, 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 home office, you know, well, where am I?
Else?
Yeah? Yeah, where else, exactly. But really to work with really nice questions, you know. So just to give you an example, such a nice question would be, okay, so what are you actually looking forward to today, you know? Or what are you thrilled about our cooperation so far? So what is meaningful to you about our collaboration? You know, so and then also some personal questions, because this is something that has been avoided in the corporate world for a long, long time. And we know how much the vulnerability matters currently, and how much we really need to give each other these moments of mindfulness, you know, so really to be here and now. And what I know also from the coaching process, I think this is also the key right now. It's much more important to be present than to be perfect.
Do you see, I mean, this is really very interesting, and from the very practical work that you do you see any sort of I don't know, culturally based norms in terms of showing vulnerability? Do you think that that's something? I know sometimes we talk about, you know, different cultural tendencies that mean the cultures may be more open to, you know, showing more emotion or showing less emotion. But do you think that that's really something that's culturally defined, or do you see that also specifically within the organizational cultures? And could you identify maybe aspects of those organizational cultures that lead towards that being successful?
Yeah, I think that yes, you know, this is really something that we are talking about, unconscious bias, also conscious bias. Yeah. And what I see is that it's really tricky and pretty challenging to predict such behaviors. Just to give you an example, I'm conducting a series of webinars for a pharma industry. And there are participants from different corners of the world. Nevertheless, they are based in Germany and in Poland. And what actually happened to me from the very, very beginning was that there was this issue of switching on the camera. And it was definitely the part of showing vulnerability, you know. So people felt so overwhelmed with the situation that they need to be professional and really appear as professional employees in the home setting, that they were very, very reluctant to switch on the camera. And then I said with one group, you know what, we've got right now a fantastic possibility to see each other for at least the first 3 minutes. So you haven't seen your colleagues in the past weeks. There is this great option just to do it and to say hi. And then, of course, you know, when we have discussions, you are very welcome to switch on the cameras again. During the presentation, it's okay when you feel more comfortable just having audio. And magic happened, because most of the people switched on the cameras and they waved and they smiled, and it wasn't really dependent whether it was, you know, in the German context, Polish context. I think what really counts is the invitation. So, you know, sometimes you have so many expectations based on the cultural differences that you don't simply give this invitation to other people, because you say, you know, it won't work anyway. And sometimes it's worth trying.
I mean, I guess that leads into all these jokes about people with bad hairstyles and not having been to the hairdressers. But I noted from an American neuroscientist, Srini Pillai, who was talking about, this sort of current situation in terms of storytelling, particularly. He said something along the lines that, it is important to tell stories. Stories are important, but not all stories are useful in the current situation. And he was very careful to identify stories that show resilience as stories that are valuable.
Yeah.
How would you see that?
Definitely, yes. Because people, when they hear storytelling, first of all, they think immediately of this entertaining aspect. And of course, you can also, work with stories in the gamification context. It is lots of fun. However, it's just one possibility. There are many, many other possibilities. And I think it's also the highest time to talk about, this worn-off stories. So exactly what you are addressing right now. So what stories don't serve us anymore? Mm-hmm. And there are plenty stories like that. When I think of our field, of the intercultural field, these are the stories of, talking about conflicts all the time. Mm-hmm. So there are cultural differences. Oh, awful. So we need to deal with it. Oh, such a challenge. It's also a chance. And I think this is also the highest time to put the emphasis on, choosing the positive response. So how much is actually dependent on our attitude, and to see the intercultural differences as the first step. So really to be aware of them, but to focus much more on our own behavior and how we actually act in the situation. If we start to laugh, if we start to, ask questions, which is pretty important, show also curiosity. By the way, curiosity is not always welcome in different cultures. Yeah. Sometimes curiosity might mean that you are losing the faith. But, this is also something that we need to, let's say, have this sensitivity, towards the energy in the room, also in the virtual space. Mm-hmm. And I still remember talking to a woman from HR department when I said, it's really, really important to have a nice check-in at the very beginning of the webinar, especially when it's supposed to be an interactive webinar, so the people are feeling encouraged really to share. Mm-hmm. And she said, as long as you don't offer virtual yoga, it's okay. So this was also really, really funny, because I said, oh, okay, this is the border, this is the
this is like here. That's where the mindfulness is being offered on the part of organizations. It's lunchtime yoga,
exactly,
meditation,
exactly,
and yeah.
However, back to your question regarding stories, it's not only that we need to skip this one-off stories, and not to repeat them all over again, but also to start telling new stories. And especially when you say the stories of resilience, this is actually the highest time, because when we keep telling stories of success all the time, first of all, it's awful, because the story needs to have a tension, needs to have a conflict. If it's just one success after another, first of all, it's not credible. Second of all, it's boring, so nobody wants to listen to it. And when we think of these new stories, it's really like, what have I actually learned from this time, from COVID? So what have I learned from the first days, from the first weeks? Right now we can even tell, first months of the situation. And my learning point was actually, where do I stand? And is it the right direction where I want to move? So it was a profound question, that has changed also my perception of my own consultancy. And there are people who are also asking the question, okay, what is next? What does the world really need from me? and how can I support the people around in the situation. So, you know, the very first step is actually to think of your own story, how you want to shape the future with other people together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what you would recommend for us in terms of also sort of growing through the situation, is to take the time to reflect on what our own stories are and exactly how we want to shape our own futures and what reality we want to move
Yeah.
forward in. Mm-hmm. I
Yes,
think
because
that's
you know, yeah, because you know, we consider future as something that we are entering. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
that you know that this is ahead and we are entering, and we are just the actors who don't really have the influence. As it's not the truth, because we are co-creating this future,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, COVID-19 shows us really, really very directly. Hey, wait a minute, all of us, we are co-creating what's going on next. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what is so incredible, really being proactive and taking this responsibility, you know. So it's on one hand side a great chance, on the other one it's really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, there's a lot of different views about, how leadership can best manage teams currently. What suggestions would you make, or what in your coaching practice? Vulnerability, you've mentioned already. I think this idea of, identifying our own stories is also a very personal thing. Are there any other specific competences that you think leaders or people managing teams, interacting with teams, motivating teams, that you think they need to show currently?
Definitely, definitely. In order to be, you know, authentic and really credible, first of all, they have to acknowledge the energy, the level of the energy in the room. So really to take it into account that people are not able to be as efficient as they used to be, and all of them, all the leaders included, they miss also the personal contact, you know.
Yeah.
So this is something which is the very first step. And the second step is obviously to share also the stories from the past, when themselves they also were in the situations when they were overwhelmed, when they had to deal with, you know, let's say big crisis. Even if they are not really keen on sharing very personal stories, still many of them can say, you know what, 2008 there was this huge crisis, and all of us, we have survived it somehow. What we have learned out of it was really to to just bring lots of patience and think of the best possible collaboration, so that we also don't only put emphasis on the efficiency, but also on this human aspect, you know. So I know many leaders who currently offer their teams the so-called corona meetings. Once a week, they meet for the virtual coffee for literally half an hour to talk about nothing. I mean, nothing, you know, about things that are not really so much related to work. And this is something that you cannot even imagine before this time, because many people weren't able to imagine, you know, to offer something like that, even if they worked in these dispersed teams. So this situation with COVID actually is the huge experiment that, yes, on one hand side accelerates the digitalization, on the other hand side, hopefully, they accelerates the focus on tasks so much and really pushes this human factor. And one more thing which is really important is, in my opinion, is that the leaders are really very focused on their employees, so they listen to them more. You know, very often, yes, they are, especially when they work with stories, they are so focused on, okay, so how can I tell this story, you know, to motivate people, to influence people, and so on and so forth. And then what actually happens in the coaching process, I say, okay, so what do you have learned from the stories from your employees? Oh, okay, was there time to, you know, to listen to the stories? So it's also kind of this servant leadership idea, So
Okay.
before you want to influence people, you have to know them better way.
Okay, because sometimes, I mean, maybe I have this personal idea that listening isn't enough. That listening, hearing the stories, but not somehow consciously responding or acknowledging the stories is, you know, sometimes it's too almost too easy to say, you know, listen to the stories if there's no, and I don't mean action that follows, but just a conscious acknowledgement of those stories. Then I think people, you know, might have the opposite reaction and think, well, okay, yeah, you know, what's the point of me talking about, you know, my difficulties in work and my personal situation. So I think
I think, you know, when we talk about listening, it's really important to talk about listening at different levels, you know. So also, of course, this listening with understanding, you know, the content, but especially in the intercultural context, listening for understanding the emotions. So, you know, because of course we listen to the stories through our cultural perspective. This is something we cannot switch off, definitely. So sometimes there is this judgmental voice, and it's part of the game because we are humans. And again, you know, I don't really like the term active listening.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But it's used so much in intercultural literature.
It is, of course it is. But you know, what I really like is about, you know, this listening is actually much more than just, you know, thinking of the process, that it's listening and then, you know, just nodding and maybe showing that I understand, asking questions, reframing all this. Yes, sure. But we also need to observe the other person. So for example, right now, Eitne, you are nodding, you are smiling, you know, I feel really comfortable. You have created in this tandem, so to say, the psychological safety, you know. So this is really something that is a gift. And when you listen to someone and you show also this person with, you know, your whole body and also the energy level, this person feels really, really secure in the setting and willing to share even more, you know. So this is also something that we need to keep in our mind, that listening is like, you know, giving somebody a big present. When I think of the Chinese sign for to listen to, which is think, I hope I pronounce it in the right way, then the sign includes not only ears, so to hear, but also the eyes, so really to observe what we have just talked about, the mind, so really, you know, to focus your thoughts on this, what is said, but also to concentrate on this person, so really about being present in the situation. And this is what is energy consuming, you know. Our brains are lazy, and of course our thoughts wander, you know. So oh yes, great, what is going on to be served for dinner, you know. And then focus, you know, be here and now. And this is actually this listening as a gift.
Yeah. I think this is a very good point to see how our participants are listening, and to also hand over the floor to them. So I'm not sure if there are any questions. I haven't any hands raised here, but I think, Joanna, you will also have to unmute participants if they would like to ask a question. I don't know if anybody has, I don't see any raised hands, but if you could just...
Here is a question. This is from Vincent.
Yes, Vincent. Maybe you could unmute Vincent.
Yes, I have.
Possible? Super.
I have. Yes, right now. Yeah, perfect.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Pleasure to see you. Thank you for this wonderful session. I have a question indeed. I like Joanna's co-creation concept, and I was wondering, taking the two countries, cultures you know best, Germany and Poland, do you see differences in, let's say, individually, but also nationally or socially, in how people co-create or will co-create this new normal we want to indeed create. So are there people more, let's say, empowered to do that in a certain country? Will they take more initiatives? Or will they just more follow go with the flow? Any perception already that you have observed between those two cultures in co-creating?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vincent, for the question. In my opinion, it depends on the generation, to be honest, because, you know, especially the younger generation, it doesn't really matter whether in Poland or in Germany, is much, much more proactive. So when I look at them, it's something that is really fantastic. And with young generation, I mean really people who are already in the workforce, and that they are, I think, risking also more, you know, so that really ask these questions, how to co-create this space together. They really wish to change something about status quo. The only difference I see between, let's say, the speed in Germany and in Poland relates to politics. Yeah. So, you know, this is pretty tricky, because when I think of this political situation in Poland, it can be, unfortunately, be even compared with the situation in the US. Yes, it's very polarized. So this is really tricky, you know, to really think of co-creation in terms of inviting all the voices to one table, you know, because people are extremely divided because of the political situation. So this is, let's say, the biggest challenge I see at the moment. But normally, it's really more the generational idea than the country-specific dynamics.
Okay, thank you.
Vincent, could I ask you how you see that? Also maybe from your context. I mean, it's a very interesting question, because we've been talking about this as well, this idea of sort of, you know, community involvement, community action, solidarity. I don't know. Oh, I think we've lost Vincent. He's left us.
Yeah, I see.
Oh, he's here. Yeah, super.
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I see the generational thing is certainly, if you take diversity as a whole, and the generational aspect is certainly very important. I agree with Joanna. Yeah, I think it's very much generational. And then I also see some cultural differences. If I see our students, and we have lots of international students at the University of Technology in Eindhoven, and I can see that there might be some kind of a pattern of some cultures, and we fall easily in generalizations here, of course, and that some cultures, let's say some students from some cultures may not be taking so much initiative. And of course, they are also hosts. They are international in the Netherlands, so they may not be willing or able. I do see a pattern here that with cultural differences, and they're all in engineering, so they like to solve problems. I'm generalizing a bit here, but I see patterns of socially and cultural national patterns here, indeed, which kind of fall back to the old general ideas we have. So I think it confirms a little bit the generalization. That's why I was interested if you would see something different. Maybe it's too early yet, because you know, we kind of an expectative situation now of waiting what's going to happen next. But I will certainly follow up on that. I'm interested to see that more, how it develops within the young people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you. Matthew, would you like to also ask your question here? It's what story structures and elements do we need if we start to come back? Oh, 1 second, I can't see the rest of the question. To normal. Yes, Matthew.
No, exactly. So we've looked at within the crisis. So just moving to chapter 3, you know, before, during and after. Any thoughts about what would be interesting or necessary? What themes do you think may pop up later?
Yeah. So, you know, when I think of this most famous framework in the storytelling context, the hero's journey, which is not only the individual journey, but also, you know, the collectivist journey, we started in the ordinary world. We labeled it normal. We have crossed the threshold to the unknown world. We don't know where we are on this journey, you know, whether we are still before the great ordeal or already after. I think it also depends on the perception. It depends on the situation in certain countries. And then we don't know the end of the journey, so we don't really know what presence we are bringing to this, what is labeled right now new normal. So when we cross the threshold again to this, let's say, ordinary world, this ordinary world, which is, let's say, guaranteed in the hero's journey framework, doesn't exist, you know. Talking about getting to new normal is a little bit weird. And when I think of bringing this elixir, bringing the gift from this situation to this new world, I think, first of all, it will be more focused on the ethical aspects, so that people will definitely think more and focus more on what makes us all human and how do we want to interact in the human way. Because currently the digitalization makes us really not only the actors, but also the puppets in very different situations, you know. So when I think of, for example, different situations, how you can work with different platforms, video platforms. Right now we are using Zoom. Of course, we have used, I don't know, GoToMeeting, any meeting, blue button, great blue button, I never remember how it's called, in the university context, you know, or also MS Teams. And then still there are this virtual possibilities to meet, just like Cricut, where you have, you know, virtual spaces like in the virtual games, and you have your own avatar. And of course, it has got impact on our approach, on our psychological also perception. So the question is, how much do we actually, let's say, allow ourselves not to think of the ethical aspect and really to emerge this virtual world and to say, I'm only the avatar, and to lose part of, you know, control and responsibility, and how much we are really continuously thinking of this choice of the positive response. So really, you know, about our intentions. And I think this is the greatest gift we can take out of this journey right now. More self-reflection and more focus on being right now and now with other people. So we really connect at the human level. So there is this connectivity and not just, you know, what is next on the agenda? Next, okay, you know. So this is the first factor. The second is definitely the air travel. Air travel in general, ecology. So I talked to a friend of mine who is a pilot at Lufthansa. She's a woman, by the way. So
for anybody who was thinking of assuming that is a male.
And she told me, Joanna, you cannot imagine how insane it was to have all the time the same business people on the plane, flying once a week, you know, in the morning, this direction, in the late afternoon back, and this every single week. And then she said, I really, really hope this insane situation is going to be over. So this is also my hope for the future, to be honest, you know, that because of this situation right now, we will rethink what is really important in terms of face-to-face contact. And when we have this face-to-face contact, we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Matthew, thank you so much for that. That was a wonderful question. I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm afraid we're at the end, but I feel, Joanna, like this is like all great stories. This has had a great ending. You've brought in the question of ethics moving forward. Again, the sort of environmental component, which has come up in the last couple of talks as well. And very importantly, and something that was mentioned, I think also a lot by Milton Bennett in his talk, is this question of intentionality.
Exactly,
And
our intentions.
exactly what our intentions are. So I think that's wonderful. And I loved how you described that also in terms of, you know, this avatar component. So that's also leaving us with a very, you know, nice virtual visual. So I would just say thank you very much. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us. Lots of lovely insights. For those of you who've joined us again this evening, thank you. And I'll hopefully see you next Thursday again.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you, Aitna.